Welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast. My name is Michael LeBlanc, and I am your host. This podcast is produced in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. Meet Silicon Valley Trailblazer Atif Rafiq, who shares his extensive background and insights gleaned from a comprehensive and pioneering experience at Amazon, Volvo, and McDonalds, and the distinction of being the first Chief Digital Officer in the history of the Fortune 500. We're together to discuss his new book, Decision Sprint, The New Way to Innovate into the Unknown and Move from Strategy to Action. Let's listen in now. Atif, welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast. How are you doing this morning?
Michael, I'm doing fantastic, and thank you so much for having me.
Well, thanks for joining me on the pod. Where am I finding you this morning?
Well, for once, I'm at home in my hometown of Chicago, and I'm happy to say my feet are on the ground for 2 weeks, but then there's more international travel coming up.
Well, you know, as an author of a very popular book, you no doubt are in high demand. So thanks for carving out a bit of time to speak with me. I want to start with, we'll get into the book. It's a great book. We're going to get into the book and some of the ways you think in and around what you wrote. But I want to start with you. So you've got an extensive career, big brand names. Lots of folks would know them, McDonald's, Volvo, Amazon, you know, the list goes on. But give us a quick overview of how you got here from there and kind of what you do for a living now.
Sure. Well, I started my career in Silicon Valley companies, and I have sort of a general management, product management background. So I've always been trying to work on the leading edge of where the internet is going, and came up through companies like Amazon and before that Yahoo. 10 years ago, though, I made a pivot. You know, I received a call from the CEO of McDonald's, and he talked about digital being potentially one of the biggest things that they were going to dive into in decades. And at first I scratched my head and thought, well, you know, what is that? What does that even mean? What does have to do with digital? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It dawned on me very quickly that, you know, we could reformulate the customer experience, you know, with technology and digitization. And as a result, I made the leap. You know, I became the first chief digital officer in the history of the Fortune 500. And then I continued a line over 10 years of helping what you would call incumbents, you know, well-established, well-known companies sort of, you know, get to grow using things like digital and just being more innovative in what they're doing for customers. So that is sort of the summary of my career. And I'm on my next metamorphosis now, which is essentially creating, you know, ideas and software for any company and any organization to innovate faster using workflow and AI.
Now, your educational background, anyway, is mathematics. Did you always want to do what you're doing today? Was it always going to be digital? Was it always going to be business? You know, when you were a young fellow, were you always headed in this direction, or did you find yourself here?
Well, I think business has been, you know, sort of in my blood from a very early period. And the examples of that would be, you know, starting a bank in 5th grade, which failed in 7 days. So that's not necessarily a success.
Okay. We'll call that an early indicator. Okay.
That's an early indicator. Or, you know, when people are writing about, you know, different subject matters in 7th grade, I'm writing about the stock market, and my teacher's asking me, hey, should I go long on IBM? And I'm like 12 or 13. I'm like, I don't even know, you know, how do I answer that? I don't want you to lose $5,000. You're my teacher. So I had the proclivity towards business. But what I would say is that, you know, I went to a liberal arts college. I majored partly in math, and I really do believe in the combination of, you know, critical thinking skills, which you can get, you know, partially from math, but you can get it from all kinds of liberal arts subjects, of being able to, you know, reason through information, take a point of view, explain yourself, you know, defend your perspective. I think that's, you know, has served me well because basically, you know, we're in an environment where you're going to get a lot further and grow personally, you know, if you're able to get into new territory and help your organization make sense of it and think critically about it. That I think is always going to be a foolproof, you know, skill set.
Your book is Decision Sprint, The New Way to Innovate into the unknown and move from strategy to action. So first of all, when I talk to authors, love talking to authors, tell me about your journey as an author. Was this book always in you? You had a lifelong passion. You wanted, you had this experience that you wanted to get out on the page. The book is very structured. Or did it come to you as you wrote the book and then crystallize your thoughts? Tell me about your journey as writing the book.
Well, this book is not something I had imagined, putting together, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, or even 3 years ago. It's really coming out of my transition from MGM Resorts, where I was the president of the company, and I stepped down from a corporate career. And I asked myself, what's my highest contribution, to the world and the workplace? And I started thinking to myself, well, I've looked at innovation from a lot of different corners, very innovative companies like Amazon that are large. Mm-hmm. Earlier in my 20s, I started I ran a software startup. I've been part of big name brands that struggle with innovation, and are trying to add that to their culture. So I looked at it from a few angles, and I looked at it and I said, well, there is something here missing in the literature, and you don't often hear a lot about it. And it's this really maybe obvious fact that whenever you are looking at a new territory, new problem space, new opportunities, you can get stuck because the unknowns are always greater than the knowns.
Sure.
And that very fact, trips up so many organizations and makes us slow out of the gate. What do we do about that? And that's an area I have been very comfortable in the past in my various stints, helping, companies not get stuck with that part and getting it to clarity. And so I didn't think I could write 300 pages about it, but I said, let me take a stab at, what is the way to break through this conundrum and what is the sweet spot? And then as I began exploring it, I realized there's a lot here. It's about culture. It's about workflows. Mm-hmm. I've got a lot of interesting stories to tell from McDonald's, from Volvo, from Amazon, from MGM Resorts. And, honestly, I probably could have written a little bit more. So
I felt that in your latter chapters that you were just you felt like you got a lot more to say qualitatively about a whole bunch of things, but I've said enough for now, and there'll be another opportunity. That's the way the book, like it's a great structure book, but at the end, I felt that you were really getting into some of your, future thinking around context.
Michael, your instinct is very strong because really, the part that requires a sequel or an entirely different body of work is the intersection of knowledge work and AI, or to be more precise, knowledge workers and AI, right? Because when those two things come together to help companies grow and solve problems and figure out, what they should be, how they should be doing things, that is sort of the next wave. But I felt like, okay, I need to, I've written so much, let's ship this and let's get on there. But yes, to come back to your question, which is a great one, I felt it was a calling and I didn't exactly know what to expect. And I'm just happy that I was able to pull it together in something cohesive and that, and that it's helping organizations.
Historically, new technologies, I want to just at a very high level, historically, new technologies have been job creators, not job destroyers. And you alluded to that. Is AI, and do you think of AI as changing the nature of the work in companies and the people, not replacing the people? Is that how you think about AI? I mean, you said a few words about it in the book, but is your thinking about it evolving? I mean, we've had, Chat GPT just kind of probably a great leap forward, but as your thinking evolved in this regard, or are you worried? Because, listen, some people are worried about, Jeffrey Hinton, right? Leaves Google and says, I think I might be this generation's Oppenheimer. How are you thinking about it?
Well, I am worried, but that being said, I think there is a solution, and it requires haste and urgency, in the workplace for us to upskill. And so let me break that down. I think in general, AI is just always going to be better at handling the known commodities. So if there's like an SOP, an operating procedure that we do day in and day out, I think AI is really perfect for that, and it's just going to be better than people. Footnote: the reason why it's going to be great at it is because of people to begin with, because people actually documented it, and the more they documented, the better AI is at sort of being able to learn it and then execute it. So we got there. AI only exists because humans contributed the knowledge to begin with. But if it's a known commodity, AI is really just so amazing at interacting with that knowledge. So if it's known commodities, your standard execution, I think there's a lot of risk. That being said, where, human capital really adds a ton of value is kind of pairing with AI to get into, unknown territory, new things, new problems.
Yeah.
That could be anything from strategy to continuous improvement. So it's a very big space, right?
Yeah.
And figuring out what's the right thing to do? How do we cross these forks in the road? And so that is more of your knowledge, higher end knowledge work. So we need to be able to upskill and shift the mix of what people spend time on to, real knowledge work. So I have a phrase where I talk about administrating knowledge versus originating it. I feel that we can be job creators around, things where people work with AI to originate new knowledge that companies need to grow and sustain themselves. If it's just administrating what companies already know, that I think is where we're looking at a lot of disruption from that perspective.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I was in Orlando doing a keynote speech to some retail technologists. And have you heard of Del Taco, a big taco outlet?
Absolutely. I've been through their drive-through. Yeah.
And their drive-through's all AI now, which I thought was, or you might know that it's AI powered. And I thought the thing that resonated the most with people in the industry is it never gets tired of upselling. So there's some fun stuff, right? Never gets tired of always asking, would you like fries with that? Imagine that back in the day. I wanted to hone in back on the book. I wanted to hone in on the new way part of the title. I mean, big companies, retailers, large organizations been project managing for literally many, many decades. Six Sigma, Amazon process, the famous one-page press release kind of process. What's different about your philosophy enough that listeners might consider adopting it? Take us through that new way part, specifically about the book.
I think the difference between what I'm writing about and most of what else you'll see out there around innovation is really how you actually start with unknowns and make them actionable. And so the heart of that is exploration and purposeful exploration. And so what is exploration? That's where maybe you have a problem statement of something you're trying to solve for, but you don't have the recommendations. You haven't drawn conclusions yet. And there's that space where it's actually okay to have a lot more questions than answers and be comfortable with that, provided that we, are making these questions actionable to do, what Amazon as corporate culture is very good at is like really high quality detective work. Mm-hmm. And then use that detective work, some fact-based, some reasoning-based to draw the right conclusions. Now, why is this novel or interesting is because the human factors in companies, around initiatives, because there's a lot of pressure, right? Oh, great news, big strategy, CEO wants us to chase this North Star, a working team, you feel good, you're in the middle of the action, but there's a lot of pressure, and the human factors lead to things where people very quickly make judgments as opposed to suspending judgment, where they try and drive alignment too early before they've actually explored the problem or even clarified the problem that they're trying to solve. And this mentality comes from, deep-seated execution culture where it's about milestones and gates and et cetera, which are all fine, but we need to clarify the problem statement. We need to build and run an exploration, and we need to use that to draw the conclusions and recommendations and then align. Yeah. Getting this out of sequence is very common, and it's very dangerous for companies.
Well, and it's one thing I picked up in the book. I mean, if I can put it this way, you worry about a lack of patience. In other words, inherently action-oriented people wanting to move fast, get things done. But the risk is on that journey, the kind of, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail problem. Let's just get it done. How can organizations get, square that circle or kind of get the best of both worlds. You want action-oriented individuals who want to move forward, but at the same time, you don't want to go so fast that you miss whether it's nuances or bigger points because you're just hitting, as you said, you're hitting stage gates or milestones. So do you run into that often, and what's your advice on that?
Yeah, I mean, I love an obsession for action. The question is action on what? And what I like to, emphasize is, really having a lot of obsession for inputs. Like, hey, this is the problem we're trying to solve. What do we need to know? What are the blind spots? What are the key questions? What do we need to be thinking about? We should be hungry. That's where we should take our action orientation to, gather all the right inputs so we could, canvas this problem without blind spots and weighing things in the right way, and I think that's very shortchanging companies often because the action orientation is towards deciding what should we do. Oh, the right answer is A or B, but we're not at that point yet. So we need to redirect that energy to what I call purposeful exploration, which doesn't take a ton of time, but it actually, in the end, you'll get to the, to the real action faster because there'll be less fits and starts. I mean, when you shortchange the exploration and you think you're moving fast, but then you have a blind spot, they have to go back to the drawing board, rethink the alignment. People are not on board. It's actually, quite frankly, a lot slower to get out to market with your idea.
Yeah, a whole host of sins that kind of pop up in that process. I don't know what you think about the COVID era that we lived through in terms of its longer lasting impacts on the work world and society. But let's hone in on one thing. I think it's fair to say that the nature of work has changed fairly significantly in terms of work from home and the way you hire. And it's not like people weren't hired remotely before, but it's kind of a big deal, right? I think. And you talk about how work can get done. I was intrigued by the asynchronous kind of work that can happen in the process. Now, many retailers and leaders I talk to are still struggling a little bit to find the right zen of having employees work from everywhere and the benefits and some of the drawbacks. What's your advice to leaders working with this? What is a new culture for many? Employees and coworkers are trying to adapt because they're not in the offices. Like, are there other processes and skills to be learned, or are you think we're in a better place, or is it just a different tact from even when you were doing this in at McDonald's? I'm pretty sure everybody was in the office, kind of thing. Talk about that for a bit.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I think it's a brand new frontier, and everyone's trying to figure out what the right answer is.
Yeah,
and it's still pretty foggy out there, quite frankly. If we take two camps, employees and employers, they bring relevant, they have reasons for how they would like to see this world unfold. On the one hand, and I think it's not great for everybody, or anybody, that, when you have 100% remote work gets very transactional. And I hear that, I heard a well-known venture capitalist talk about his portfolio companies and this trade-off where things are getting done so fast, over Slack and texting and, people, but at the same time, it's so fast that people lose their connection and sense of belonging with the organization.
Sure.
And mainly because they don't see each other. And so efficiency is sort of not our God, when it comes to collaboration and building team and culture. I mean, we can all be in, 7 different places and be, very efficient with our deliverables. But is that really giving us a sense of belonging and connection with other people? I think that's, we need to solve for that. So how do we do that? Well, I've seen certain leaders embrace what I refer to as contribution days, which are essentially
interesting.
Yeah, that's the idea that, there are 3 or 4 days in a month where we gather the team together and we're doing team level collaboration and problem solving, whatever that is. It's going to be different for every team and in every organization, but there is some work that's better done together. It's good to put a structure around that, as opposed to, and let people be remote for the other things where they can just essentially be individual, contributing over a Zoom meeting.
Yeah. So last week I found myself at an MGM property, and I was in Vegas at a conference. And in the world of you never know what's going to happen next, you may know there's a cyber attack on the MGM properties, and it was a bit of a we were getting in the rooms, but there's all kinds of challenges. So I guess COVID and now all this, we probably knew it before, taught us to expect the unexpected. The plans are subject to change, and I perceive that organizations that are more successful now culturally have changed from strategic planning to agility, scenario planning, approaching innovation in a different way. Is it a false trade-off that you need to be more agile and less planned out in your approach, or how do we think about that now with, now there's a climate incident? I mean, there's all kinds of things. They seem to be accelerating in terms of the impact. Do you think differently about your process in the pace of these these pretty random disruptions?
Well, I think that to get to the heart of your question, I mean, there is a role for planning. I mean, I think there's a great value in setting a strategic direction, and every company has this one PowerPoint where it's a pyramid. At the top is the mission and the purpose, and then there's some strategic pillars, and below that are some initiatives. And I think that's, in my experience, those actually tend to be fairly stable, interestingly, meaning, if you're when you're an organization, it's not like you're throwing that out every 3 months and recrafting it, and the organizations and the leaders tend to be pretty good at knowing what these strategic areas are and the initiatives that sort of, might comprise them. That part, I think, is pretty stable. Now, at the level of an initiative or a project, how do you actually make it clarify what you're trying to solve for and make it happen in a way where the impact's going to be realized and it's going to happen, with the right pace? That, I think, is where we need to solve for the agility piece that you mentioned. And that's where, a well-defined plan is okay, but only after you actually embrace the idea that you're going to start with a lot of unknown territory, and you need a method to navigate the unknown. And in my lingo, that's going through phases of exploration, alignment, and decision-making together, what I refer to as upstream work, before you move on to downstream execution. And so I think you need an upstream system for each of your key initiatives or ideas to make sure that eventually what gets done is not only high quality, happens with speed, but also not watered down, lives up to the ambition. If you can put that together with your overall strategic, direction, your North Star, I think that's sort of like what you should be doing in the leadership part of an organization, is keeping that all together.
We haven't spent a whole lot of time kind of page by page going through the book, because the folks listening, I would encourage them to get this book. It's well structured. You've got the method. You've got and it's a very rigorous approach. Let's end on that last question around advice for the listeners, and I'm going to put it in a framework of 2 starts and 1 stop to experience success, innovating their way to a better position with your experience and with your model, personally and professionally. So what's your advice? 2 things they should start doing, and 1 thing that they should probably stop doing.
The first thing is to begin with questions and look at a high quality question list as essentially getting the first or second base on a brand new idea or, brand new strategic objective. And I was always really excited when my team was able to start with, kick off an initiative saying, here are the things we need to get our head around. And something like a question list, I think, is a very powerful way to do that. So I'd advise starting with that. And the second thing related to that would be to allocate time to have teams develop, FAQs, or to get to the bottom of these questions and develop some high quality fact base or reasoning base to then begin to take opinions and draw conclusions. So building the exploration, running the exploration, I would advise those 2 things as things you should start doing. And in terms of what we might stop doing, I think the corollary to that is actually suspending judgment. So really, we don't want to, it's okay to contribute questions versus like questioning the validity of an idea. That comes later. So I advise the idea of exploration before alignment as opposed to alignment before exploration.
Oh, interesting. Well, listen, we've barely scratched the surface. It's as I said, it's a great book. I'll put a link in the show notes. Now, typically, I would ask you if you're a LinkedIn person for people to get in touch, but I see you've got like 500,000 LinkedIn connections. So clearly, you're a LinkedIn person. But in addition to getting in touch with you, connecting on LinkedIn, where can folks go to keep up with your current thoughts and your perspectives?
Yeah, 3 ways. So LinkedIn, I do check my messages. Decisionsprint.com is my website for the book, where you can learn more about what I'm up to there. And then my software company is called Ritual, and that's available at ritual.work. It's a software app that is currently in beta and soon to be public, and it provides the workflow and AI around a lot of the problem-solving techniques that I'm recommending.
Oh, fantastic. Well, Atif, thanks so much for joining me on the Voice of Retail podcast. Great interview, great exploration. As I said, I encourage everybody to pick up this book. It's a great read, and it's very both practical and inspirational, I think, for those of us who are trying to create innovation in organizations. So thanks for making time, and thanks for joining me on the pod.
Michael, it's been my pleasure. I really appreciate you having me on.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of The Voice of Retail. If you haven't already, follow on your favorite podcast platform so new episodes will land automatically each week. And be sure and check out my other retail industry media properties, the Remarkable Retail Podcast with Steve Dennis and the Global E-Commerce Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc, Senior Retail Advisor, Keynote Speaker, Rethink Retail 2023 Global Top Retail Influencer. If you want more content or chat, follow me on LinkedIn. Safe travels, everyone.